Tell me the name of the book again.
The name of the book is JFK and the Unspeakable. Why Kennedy Died and Why It Matters. By James W. Douglas, with 2 S's.
And how did you find this book again? Oh, you read the...
I came across a case online that had not been, that had not received any publicity whatsoever, but it was a 1999 civil lawsuit that was brought by the descendants and heirs of Martin Luther King against the Memphis government and others, alleging that they were involved in King's death, and a jury found that they were.
I find that so phenomenal.
You know, when you never heard about it, because it's not the kind of thing you're going to hear about. The media is complicit in this whole thing, and so that led me to the JFK book, which lays out a crystal clear case that Kennedy was killed by the CIA and essentially his own security apparatus. The CIA ran the show, but every government agency was involved, everyone. You know, the FBI, the Secret Service, anybody who had to be coerced, all the branches of the service, Army, Navy, Marines. That's why the autopsy was rushed out of Dallas to get it out of the hands of a civilian or a state agency.
Right. Tell me about the medical examiner. Said they switched him at the last minute,
they switched bodies.
They switched bodies.
That was what. That was why Officer Tippit died. Officer Tippit was a dead ringer lookalike for JFK. He was killed, and his body was substituted for JFK's on the flight back to Washington. And the autopsy was done on Tippit's body. Whoever actually killed Tippit, and I've heard that it was G. Gordon Liddy, but that didn't seem to be very well documented. But whoever killed Tippit, and it wasn't Oswald, was supposed to have shot him in the back of the head.
To support the lone gunman theory.
They needed a body that had been shot in the head from behind, and that didn't happen. You know,
they screwed up.
They screwed up, and so the guy on the plane, I can't remember his name, the guy who was the master body manipulator, tried to make it look like Tippit's body had been shot from behind, but it was pretty obvious that it hadn't. And so we ended up, trying to fix up Kennedy's brain to make it look like he had been shot from behind. But there was no doing it. His head was gone. There was nothing to work with, But even Jackie, when she was finally called in, she and her brother and his brother, Robert, were to make the final identification of the body before it was going to be interred. She said, "That's not Jack." And she ought to know. And Robert Kennedy, the same thing. He said, "No, is that him? That's not him." So, I mean, they had control of the evidence, start to finish, top to bottom, the whole investigation. And the Warren Commission was no different, headed by Allen Dulles. Allen Dulles was the guy who Kennedy had fired as head of the CIA after the Bay of Pigs.
And he was at the head of the Warren Commission.
The big boss of the Warren Commission, yeah. And the CIA was everywhere. They had penetrated every institution, every governmental organization had CIA in it, including the Dallas Police Department.
Right.
The Chicago Police Department. There was a foiled plot to shoot him on November 2nd in Chicago, and it was tipped off by an FBI informant named Lee, which may indicate that Lee Oswald was in fact an FBI informant trying to save the president at the very same time that he was being set up to take the fall for doing it. And he may have tried to save him in Dallas as well. But by then, he didn't know that the FBI was in on it, too.
So and that he was being set up.
He was being set up. They had to get rid of him. He was an unreliable intelligence asset.
Right. There's a woman who wrote a book about him.
Yeah.
Just recently.
And about the doubles.
And about the doubles, right.
Right. There were Lee Harvey Oswald doubles that were used. And they used them they overused them. So people who, they had a guy, for instance, a guy picked up a hitchhiker, looked like Oswald, was carrying a bundle that was wrapped in paper, and he said there were curtain rods. Well, it could have been a rifle.
Yeah.
It was looking like a rifle. He dropped them off right near the school book depository. Well, it turned out the government didn't want that evidence. They set it up to incriminate Oswald, but it had other problems with Oswald's real whereabouts that was provable, which would have indicated, uh-oh, something's going on here.
Right.
So they had to suppress that evidence. They arrested this guy, tried to convince him to change his story. He wouldn't change his story. They threw him in a mental institution. He died 9 years later in a mental institution.
Wow.
It's astonishing. I mean, they're absolutely ruthless. They have no...
Ruthless.
Yeah. To shut this guy up, they put him in a mental hospital. Drugged him up, kept him on Thorazine for years and years and years until he finally died. And there were many other witnesses similar to this guy, guys who just wouldn't relent on their story, who ended up dead. Ended up dead. There's over 100 verifiable unnatural deaths of Kennedy, Warren Commission witnesses and Kennedy assassination witnesses of various investigations.
Yeah, I want to see the Kevin Costner movie again.
All the mafia guys died. Giancana, they all knew. They were in on it. There was a story in here where the mob was asked if they would take a contract on Martin Luther King. And the mob turned them down. He said, no way. We worked with you guys before. Yeah. We're not doing it again.
Too many of us died.
But all of those mobsters, ended up dead.
Yeah.
Right around 1977, there was a rash of mobster deaths because there was a congressional assassinations investigation. And that's when there were two waves of witness deaths. The first was after the Warren Commission report, and the second was in the mid-70s. A graph of it shows these two clear waves of unnatural deaths.
Right.
Which statistically proves conspiracy beyond a shadow of a doubt. Because the odds against so many unnatural deaths in this one group, with only that one thing in common, are so astronomically large that it couldn't possibly have happened without somebody deliberately undertaking the job
right.
to snuff out Kennedy assassination witnesses. The speculation has always been, so a conspiracy that large couldn't be suppressed. Well, they're right; it can't be suppressed.
Right.
But it can be kept very, very quiet if you're willing to kill as many people as you can. At any rate, this book is pretty depressing, and he doesn't go beyond the end of the story. Basically, he takes it up through the 70s. But nothing's changed, The same people are in charge.
The same people, the very same people.
The very same people, and their progeny, of course. At this point, most of them, most of that generation is dead. George Herbert Walker Bush is still very much alive.
Yeah.
And he was a key figure. There's photographs of him in Dallas Plaza on the 22nd of November, the very day. And he was working for the CIA.
Did he run the CIA?
He did. He became director of the CIA later.
Right.
Before he became president. Vice president under Reagan. And there's some speculation that the attempted assassination of Reagan was an attempt to have Bush installed as president 8 years early.
So I love what you said about the mafia and the U.S. government had the same business model.
It's precisely the same business model.
Pay
or suffer.
Pay or suffer.
The business model of the mafia. You give us our regular cut, or something bad might happen to you.
Yeah.
We
send Guido over.
Yeah, Guido's coming over for a little visit.
Yeah. Boy, that's so true.
Yeah, and so, and Douglas made an excellent point that the mob and the CIA had become one, essentially.
Yeah, that's how it seems.
At a certain point, they
where did the mob disappear to?
They knew each other's. They knew how the game was played. And the mob, did certain jobs, and the CIA did certain other jobs. They had, division of labor.
A symbiotic relationship.
But they have a very symbiotic relationship. And all the mobsters who knew about the Kennedy assassination, they all ended up murdered in the 70s for the church, when the church investigation took place. Yeah, there were two waves of Kennedy assassination witness deaths. One of them was for the Warren Commission, and the second one was in the 70s when Congress investigated. And in the 70s, though, still almost everything remained classified. Much of the material that Douglas used was declassified, after the 90s. Some of the most revealing information came out in the 90s and early 2000s because those people were finally getting old enough that they thought, well, if they kill me now,
right,
I've already lived my life.
Yeah.
And so they couldn't, these people would, it amounted essentially to deathbed confessions and deathbed testimony and, late in life, 30 years after the fact testimony that really filled in a lot of the holes, And some of those people did end up suffering for it, but, they didn't want to go to their graves with it untold. Yeah, Sam Giancana he was one of the big family guys.
The mafia guys.
Who, he knew everything. He knew all about it. And when he died, he was shot 7 times in a circle right around his mouth. It's the mob sending quiet little signals. I know exactly why he died. He was subpoenaed to testify, which I doubt he would have, frankly.
Right.
I'm sure he would have taken the 5th. But nobody was going to take a chance on that. Creating the CIA was a big mistake. Even Truman recognized it later on, too. And given him, he created a secret cadre of assassins with almost unlimited funding that nobody can account for.
Right.
And that you can classify your activities as top secret so nobody can find out what you're doing. Of course this is a dangerous outfit.
Yeah.
Unbelievable power and absolutely no responsibility or accountability to anyone for it. They were acknowledged that they killed and that they assassinated foreign leaders, installed governments, did exactly what they ended up doing here. Why did the people who created that think that, oh, we're only going to do that overseas, don't worry, we don't have to worry about that happening here. And now that is the organization that essentially still controls the government. There's no reason to think that it doesn't.
Well, there's no reason to think that it doesn't. And we keep saying that the president is a puppet.
He is.
He is. He clearly is.
Yes. And and for all of this research that Douglas did, he cannot identify who actually made the decision. Who said, okay, we're going to kill Kennedy? How did that come about? It was an institutional decision. The decision was made in every government office, essentially. Hoover was stunned at how little power he had. He thought he was a powerful guy, but he got the word, and he just shut up and stopped. He was not even close to where the real power lies.
Yeah.
And power, once again, as everywhere, is simply the ability to kill people.
And the more people you can kill, you don't have to kill them.
No.
You just have to be able to, and people have to know it.
That's right. The President of the United States is a very powerful man because he can kill you from a great distance, and pretty much at will. And he's claimed that right. He's claimed he can do it to us. He claimed he can do it to the people who elected him.
Yeah. So this will start your day off right.
Cheerful,
isn't it cheerful? Oh my goodness. Let's have some more coffee. How about a donut while we're at it?
They hold us in such low regard that they think they can pull off these, shabby
and
farces.
For the most part, they
and
can.
Fool us, and they fool enough of us.
Yep. They only have to fool enough of us, and the rest of us are conspiracy theorists and the fringe.
We're
fringe elements.
And it comes around to war idolatry.
Oh yeah.
Jesus, cop worship and soldier worship.
Yeah, and our friend Frank Harris, who we love, said, what was he said the other day? He said, "Do you think that the United States government is asking for
trying to start a
war with Russia?" And of course, Frank.
Do you doubt it, Frank?
Yeah.
Of course. What else are they doing over there?
This is what they do. This is our only industry.
What possible interest do I have in going to war
with Russia
for somebody in Syria?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care.
But it's all about the war machine and not about morals or right and wrong or terrorism.
We keep the war machine busy.
Yes.
Hey, the Cold War ended. What happened?
All of a sudden, everybody was so depressed.
Now we've got terrorism.
Yeah.
And terrorism is way better than the Cold War.
Yeah.
Because there is no big enemy.
And terrorism is all over the world, even in the United States. Why, there could be terrorism in Mount Sterling.
Yeah, Kennedy got killed for trying to stop the Cold War. He was going to end the Cold War.
Right.
And he was well on his way to doing it.
Yeah. He and Khrushchev were buddies. And
they were going to end the Cold War. He was going to schedule a visit to Russia, with the express purpose of, holding out the olive branch and saying, okay, let's forget this nuclear war stuff. Let's just, we can both live on this earth.
And that's where the American people are so bamboozled.
We are propagandized.
Is the military worship, and cop worship is kind of coming to an end. People are starting to see, more and more slowly.
So.
But the military worship, if you denigrate the military, you say things like "no soldiers, no war." All the military mothers can never accept the fact that their sons, except for Cindy Sheehan, who has been completely marginalized.
She'll be marginalized.
Yeah, but you have to, if you accept the truth about the war, that we're not fighting any enemies, that we're just making profits on war. Yes, how horrible would that be if you're a mother whose son had died or daughter had died?
They have to believe that they're fighting for our freedom.
They have to believe it.
Well, if they are fighting for our freedom, they're not doing much of a job of it.
Well, I love the meme that says, if our soldiers were really fighting for their freedom, they'd be over here fighting the U.S. government.
Yeah.
Because our own government is taking our freedoms.
The United States military is simply the enforcement arm of the central bank now.
Yeah.
It has nothing whatsoever to do with your freedom.
No.
And the fact that they're fighting at all reduces your freedom.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're losing a whole generation of, young men.
Well, the casualty rates are so low that
casualty rates are low, but they're
it's more dangerous to live in Chicago as a 20-year-old black man than it is to go to Iraq as a 20-year-old black soldier.
But a whole generation of young men who don't have any other job,
and
no other opportunity
except
for the military. That's what they want.
Right.
Which, there's a great Laura Ingalls Wilder quote, she wrote Little House on the Prairie. And she said, if you live on the farm, the government doesn't want you to live on the farm. Because if you live on the farm, you are independent. You don't pay any taxes. So that's why the war on farmers.
Right.
It's not because they don't want, it's all the other agencies are, we're trying to keep you safe because that's what they have to believe.
Right.
But the goal is to have no farmers so there won't be any jobs and so you can't be self-sufficient. The war on homesteaders and homeschooling.
Yep.
It's all about the military-industrial complex. I think
it is.
It all follows.
It is.
The trail leads right back there.
War is the only thing we produce now.
Mm-hmm.
The only viable industries in the United States now are war industry. So they got to convince these soldiers that they're fighting for freedom. When in fact, being a soldier is a career choice. It's not. They don't join the army because they want to fight for our freedom. They join the army because they can't find any other job, and this seems like a pretty good deal. Right.
It's propaganda, and then they shoot you full of every vaccine known to man. And give you,
all kinds of other stuff.
All kinds of other stuff, not having it.
Apparently SSRIs are flowing through military veins at pretty heavy rates.
Oh, yeah. Well, 22 a day kill themselves. 22 veterans a day kill themselves.
How many of those on SSRIs?
Well,
I'll bet the majority of them.
That's, Dr. Sue Sisley, who is fighting for the marijuana research for PTSD.
Yeah.
They don't want this because marijuana will kill the pharmaceutical industry.
Mm-hmm.
Old people on SSRIs, veterans, anybody, children in, anybody in a government program. Right. The veterans go to the VA.
And from the point of view of a government who is claiming to keep you safe, how could you possibly improve on a drug that occasionally causes a mass murder? Because it fits so very well with other agendas, the gun control agenda. The people with guns are dangerous. There are crazy people among us who will kill us. Mm-hmm. Of course, what a wonderful side effect to a drug.
Right.
For the interest of keeping us safe. But mostly what they keep us safe from is them.
And from knowing.
It's the mafia model. We'll keep you safe, and if you decide that you don't want us to keep you safe, we will make sure that you're not safe. We'll kidnap you and throw you in jail.
Right. Matt Bevin made an excellent analogy. He said, look at the United States Postal Service and UPS. Right. He said they're basically in the same business. Mm-hmm. He said UPS made a $3 billion profit last year. Mm-hmm. The United States Postal Office lost $1.5 billion.
Right.
So he said, show me on a monopoly. He said, show me any business run by the U.S. government when there's a free market alternative where the government does it better, faster, cheaper, anything. He said there isn't a single one.
There's no example.
And there's no example.
Because there are no negative consequences.
Right.
We lose money, that's okay.
With the taxpayers
will make it up.
Right.
Yeah. You're not going to lose your job.
Right. You're not going to lose your job. You're still going to get your pension.
There are no consequences to negative results. In fact, it could result in more money.
Right, and that's why the military-industrial complex gets away with it. There are no consequences to failed wars. Oops.
Oh well.
Yeah.
Well, because the war is the end in itself. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Win or lose.
Right. And since
the banks are on both sides.
And since the wars are so far away, and we can't monitor them, and the people who do monitor them, like Gareth Porter and the people that Scott Horton has on his show, they're only on Scott Horton's show.
That's right.
They're not on, they're not on CBS or NBC.
And they're not going to be.
I think Gareth has been on CNN or something every in a blue moon.
Right.
But he needs to be.
So they can ridicule.
Right. So we don't have any eyes on the ground over there. So they can say whatever they want to say about what's happening there.
And mostly we're just killing little brown people, in places very far away.
Right. And there's, but so they're Muslims, so it's okay if they die. So what's the solution, Mr. Venable?
I really don't have any faith in the Christian approach of turning the other cheek. And I'm not quite sure that nonviolence is the answer either.
It doesn't look like it's going to be because the United States government is so violent.
These are the people who get killed. Gandhi, King.
Yeah.
Even Kennedy, who was no saint.
Right. No.
If I had to look at Kennedy's his policies and the way he ran the government and so forth, he was a thug. Mm-hmm. The stuff that he did against U.S. Steel during the price hike question. There was this big battle. U.S. Steel wanted to raise prices like 3% or something, and inflation had been raging along, very, very steadily at 2 or 3%, and Kennedy just stomped them down. Mm-hmm. He used every agency of the government against them. Starting investigations. His brother, the Attorney General, just ruined these people, and they hated him, and for good reason. And he was a socialist. He was a Democrat, all the way. But his redemption redeems all of that. He and Khrushchev, those two people are the single reason that the world was not completely incinerated in the early '60s, because Kennedy's military were urging, every one of them was urging him to do a first strike, nuclear strike. They wanted to just wipe out the Soviet Union with a first nuclear strike. And he, to his great credit, he did not let them do it. I'm surprised it didn't happen after he was shot.
Right.
But
maybe somebody came to their senses. If you kill Russia, then we just got rid of our biggest justification for going to war.
That may be so. And also you've just, ruined the entire northern hemisphere. I mean, there was no way you could avoid devastating the United States, even if they didn't shoot back, even if you did wipe them out.
Right.
You're going to die in the fallout of the nuclear winter that would be left over after, killing 40 or 50 million Russians.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that you've just murdered 30 or 40 or 50 million people.
Right. That's so far down the scale of consideration.
Kennedy still was dealing. He had Curtis LeMay, Bomber LeMay, was still in the Joint Chiefs when Kennedy was president, and LeMay was positively insulting to Kennedy, and told him, man up here, we need to strike these people now.
Yeah.
Such a naive, rule-following, law-abiding bunch that
this whole thing about us being a nation of laws. Except if the laws are...
only those who obey them.
Well, we're a nation of laws as long as you're looking at the Constitution as the laws. But if you're looking at the statutes, all the laws they've written...
They've come up in the meantime. We're undertaking the Roman model now, the Roman model of civil law, as opposed to the English tradition of common law. In the Roman model of civil law, whatever the government says is the law is the law.
Right.
There's no higher authority. So if you make it a law, then those who are under your influence must obey it. That's not how the common law worked at all.
No.
Common law worked, in dispensing justice. Laws weren't written. Laws were decided over time by people. So there was no written law against murder. There was no written law against theft. But people knew you had a victim here who had something stolen from him, and a jury of his peers were going to decide whether Joe Schmo actually stole it from him or not.
Right.
And if he did steal it from him, well, then the victim was entitled to compensation, and the perpetrator was had merited some kind of punishment. Very simple system.
Yeah.
You don't have to get caught up in the laws. There are no presumptions in such a system. All facts must be established by testimony in front of a court. But Roman civil law, the law that we've come around to now, presumption is everywhere, and it's written right into the law. So such and such will be presumed against such and such until it's proven otherwise. Presumptions are very, very deadly and very, very unjust.
Give me an example.
Well, in tax court.
Well, in tax court is a special court.
It is, but it's what the other courts are coming around to.
Where you're guilty until proven innocent.
Exactly. We have been bamboozled. There has been serious, monkeying around with the rules of the courts and the rules of that control the courts since the 1940s, when grand juries were pretty much eliminated as indictment by presentment was eliminated, meaning that people couldn't get together and investigate public figures any longer. Mm-hmm. They had to have a prosecutor if they were going to get an indictment. Well, when that happened, a good many other changes were made to the rules of criminal and civil procedure that essentially transformed the courts from their Article III common law nature to territorial law courts, where they were not bound by the common law at all, and they were simply territorial courts that answer not at all to the Constitution. These are the courts we have today, and it was very subtly done, and I'm not going to get into the legalese about it.
Good.
But it's all part of a larger picture that the nature of the law and the nature of the nature of government in the United States is being changed very, very subtly and very steadily, but with an intelligent goal in mind. It's planned out. It's not just coincidence that these changes have occurred. But yeah, to get down that highway, you got to delve into some reading that is so dull that not even I can do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can read some pretty dull stuff, I'll tell you. Yeah, it's not looking good for freedom, for liberty. So, a lot of people have said, well, I'm not going to vote because voting doesn't matter. And if voting mattered, they wouldn't let you do it? Was it Lincoln?
I believe it was Mark Twain.
Oh, Mark Twain. I think it was Mark Twain.
I agree with him.
You agree with him. But on a local level, I think it still matters because they can't manipulate every single.
On a local level.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be the governor's race of Kentucky.
It might be.
I don't think so.
Well, we're going to see.
And one of the other things that this book really made me aware of is that the system, per se, has its own personality, its own goals, and its own agenda. That even being the chief executive of the system, if the system and you are not in agreement, you are going to get resistance from that system to your lawful executive orders. And if the people who you supposedly are, the instruments of your executive power, if they don't cooperate, it doesn't matter if you've got executive power. You have to be in a position to make them execute your orders, which is what Kennedy had a problem with. He could not get his subordinates to do what he told them to do. And the perfect example is Henry Cabot Lodge in Vietnam. Henry Cabot Lodge was the ambassador to Vietnam. Well, Henry Cabot Lodge had his own agenda. He was going to have the Diem regime there's going to be a coup that was supported by the CIA and supported by Lodge. And Kennedy ordered him repeatedly, there will be no coup, we will not support a coup, we're getting out of Vietnam. He told him again and again and again. Lodge just ignored him. He didn't even, he wouldn't answer his phone calls. Imagine the ambassador will not answer the president's phone calls. And, and Lodge was so powerful and so well connected that Kennedy couldn't just up and fire him. He had to figure out some way to fire him. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And he was in the process of it when he was killed. But it's a perfect example of, just because you're the chief executive doesn't mean your orders will be executed.
Well, but in a state, it'd be much harder to defy.
Maybe.
It would be much harder over the long haul to stand up to that and to, there'd be more public scrutiny. Because there would be legislators and newspapers who would be all over that.
I hope so.
Yeah. I think in Kentucky we can still count on that.
Well, maybe so. I mean,
in a state.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah. I think in a state we can still count on it.
But, you got Matt Bevin is obviously not going to be supported by the local government labor unions. He's talking about reducing the size of government.
Right.
No government labor union wants the size of government reduced.
Right.
And all government, organizations now, all government workers are unionized.
Right.
Very, very bad mistake.
Yeah.
Huge mistake. But, pretty much nothing you can do about it now. They're talking about sacred promises that we made to public employee unions. I'm sorry, they promised on my behalf.
Yeah.
I wasn't part of that promise. I wasn't part of that deal, but I'm the guy who pays the bill.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's not a sacred promise. It's it's a political promise. You swap this promise for their votes, and I get the bill.
Yeah.
I don't see the sacredness of that promise.
Right.
Who's we?
The taxpayers.
Taxpayers don't get to say. They don't get to say we. We hire people. We elect people to go there and speak for.
Well,
we,
then we
then
talk
they
to
don't.
it, but then they don't exactly, and because there's no consequence.
That's right.
First of all, you have to. It comes down to whether or not you trust your candidate. Is your candidate trustworthy?
Right.
I think that's that's one of the things about Matt Bevin.
Yeah.
That
I mean, he's one of the few trustworthy candidates I think we've seen.
Because he's not a politician.
Right.
When you talk to Matt, people change their minds.
Yeah.
They go, okay, I'm pulling the Comer sticker off my car and putting a Matt Bevin.
Yeah.
So to think that he can't walk into the Kentucky legislature and get some of those people on his team,
No,
he's persuasive,
he's
he's
guy.
direct, he's honest.
Yeah. All of that.
All of that. And I think because he is so, he's going to, raise the bar for the legislature. Comer won't raise the bar at all.
No, he's politics as usual.
Yeah, he's politics as usual.
He understands.
Give a little here, take a little
He's a
there.
career politician who understands that his personal success depends upon the continued growth of the state.
Yeah.
And he's all for it.
Yeah, all of his plans are continued growth of the state.
They add bureaucracies, they increase budgets, they they spread around taxpayer money, in obvious purchase of votes. Oh yeah, I'm going to pay for your college education. Want to vote for me?
Right.
Sure you will, pal. But people believe it. I mean, people
And
believe these promises as if they had ever kept one.
And he panders to the government employees.
They're a very powerful union now. Way too powerful. The government union should not be allowed.
Right.
Even Roosevelt.
People, and he gets to say, well, I voted for the pension. Gosh, that was a bad vote.
But
here it is.
that's all water under the bridge, isn't it? And I made $500,000.
Speaking of bridges.
We can build a couple more.
And we can, he allowed tolls into the state. But anyway, I don't want to go over all Comer's bad votes. There are just too many. We'd be here all day. But yeah, I think that, people who assume that Matt is too naive to get things done in
No, I wouldn't
Frankfurt.
suggest it's naivety. I think he may, I don't know, well, he knows what he's going to try to do, but the system will resist him hugely.
The system will resist him, but he's very public.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he will raise the bar. I said that before. He will raise the bar for the legislature. And some of them will step up to it. Okay, well, let's get to cleaning the house. What do you say? All right. Have a good day, everybody. Cheer up.
Cheer up.
Cheer up. Pretend you don't even see the FEMA fence around you.